Let me ask you a couple of questions. Do you know how much money you need to retire with dignity? If you have debt in your life, do you know exactly when that debt will be done? Let's talk about that today. Hey, I'm Tim Kaiser. Welcome back to the Profit Dare. On this channel, we provide simple financial solutions to inspire fearless generosity. If this is your first time stopping by, thank you so much. If you've been here before, thanks for coming back. And if you are a subscriber, thank you. Really appreciate it. So let's talk about things that we can measure in our financial life to make sure we're on track. And there are 7 or 8 things that we're going to talk about today. These are things I believe should be done annually to make sure we're on track. So we talk about stewardship on this channel and in my writings and my books and my website, and it's because I totally believe this is a very important subject for the body of Christ, and we kind of take it willy-nilly, so to speak. We sometimes think it's just about making a lot of money, or it's about like giving a lot of money. But the thing is, we have to earn money. Then with that money, we can spend it, we can save it, we can invest it, we can give it, we can use it to pay down debt. That's about all we can do with it, right? So let's make sure we're doing it all the right way. And I think most Christians want to give more than they're currently giving, but they just don't know how, or they're fearful because they have legitimate needs in their life. So this annual review will help us keep score. It's almost like a golf score where you're not competing against other people, you're competing against yourself. And you're trying to get these numbers to improve. So the first thing I encourage people to do, invite people to do, is to calculate their financial net worth as a family. And that gives us a starting point to where we are, and we can grow from there. And it's actually simple. It's done in businesses all the time. Businesses call it a balance sheet. We're just going to call it a statement of net worth. And all we do is you list all of your assets, and that's the things that you own. Could be cash in the bank, could be savings accounts, 401ks, houses, cars, anything in your house that could be sold if you needed to sell it all, like hey, God said move to Alaska or to Africa and you had to sell everything and start over. If you're selling everything, what's it going to be? So the value of those things, those are assets. And then your liabilities, you list your liabilities. And that's things that you owe. And those are typically interest-bearing debt or things that are really, it could be like a medical bill that may not accrue interest, but still is a debt that's owed. It's not your electric bill or your utility bills, your cable bill, your streaming services, your iPhone bill, whatever with Verizon. This is your mortgage, your house, your car payments, student loans, credit card bills, all those things. You list all of them. You list your assets, and then you list your liabilities, and then you subtract the liabilities from the assets, and what's left over is your net worth. Hopefully that number is positive. Now, when I first started out, my wife and I first started out, ours was negative. And you're like, how could you have a negative number? Well, we actually had more liabilities, more debt than we had assets. We didn't own a home. We didn't have anything invested. We had a couple old rickety cars. We had a lot of loans for student loans and credit card payments and IRS bills. I mean, it was bad. I mean, it wasn't really, really negative, but it's still underwater. And so now you try to make that number go to zero, hopefully, if you're underwater, and you want that number to grow every year. Now, there are some things that, are beyond your control. The stock market is beyond your control. You can control how much you put into it, but you really can't control how the market responds. I mean, you can, don't think that you're going to overcome this and you're the next Warren Buffett. Probably not. But the thing is, you put more money into it and hopefully it grows, and over time it'll grow. But also as you're putting, you're knocking down debt, the liabilities will shrink, and that also will improve your net worth number. So it's really important to track this. I recommend tracking it annually. You can do it quarterly if you like. That may be a little too much because a lot of swings in the market. Monthly, not a good idea. Daily is terrible. This is a snapshot because one day in your bank account, you may have one day, say the 30th of the month, and your bank account looks really good, and then your mortgage or rent payment's due on the 1st, so the next couple of days, a big payment goes out, and all of a sudden it goes down. So it's best to kind of keep it, and then do it the same period of time over and over. Again, I think annually is the best way. There's another thing that should be tracked is this is what I call your your Declaration of Debt Independence. Now, the founding fathers of the United States, those of you who are in the United States, they actually declared independence from the British in 1776. And they didn't get the war. I think the Treaty of Paris was signed like in 1783. So like seven more years, 7 more years until the actual freedom was, ratified. But they made a declaration 7 years early. So I recommend, and people in the Savvy Stewardship Academy, we have a document they can use, and you put in all your bills, you put in your interest payments, your debt, and all that, and how much you can pay. And then if you pay just the minimums, this is when you'll be debt free. Or if you can pay, additional on the principal, say $100 more a month or $200 more a month or whatever, it actually changes the date and makes it sooner. So this is a way you can actually make a declaration of debt freedom, independence, prior to actually experiencing the independence. I think it's a really good way of just planting the flag in the sand and saying, we're doing this. We're not going to live by debt forever. And this is a way to actually get traction and momentum going. That's a really good one too. Another thing that should be tracked, right? And you can do that every year, because who knows, you may get a bonus, or you may have sold something and all of a sudden it's going to change that date. So another thing is to your debt snowball or your debt avalanche. And this is where you're actually tracking the debt that you're doing every month. And you can find out, how you're tracking this stuff. I recommend staying on this thing all the time. I don't have a dog in this hunt. I don't care if you do an avalanche or a snowball. I know some people get, snowball is the best, and some people avalanche is the best. The best one is one that you will do and follow. And this is a way to systematically work on getting debt demolished. Now, is debt a bad thing? It can be. I don't think that debt is dumb. I think that's a very disparaging thing to say, because sometimes people are in debt for reasons beyond their control. But debt can be risky. And I think that carrying credit card balances because you wanted to eat sushi and drink sake is a bad thing. But sometimes credit card debt's not because of that. A lot of times it is, though, let's be honest. And if you're carrying credit card debt over because you weren't living within your means, that's not a good thing, especially for someone who is a Christian and attempting to live a life of stewardship and a blessing to others. We must live in contentment with where we are. And that's difficult sometimes. We see your friends maybe, taking great vacations or whatever. But, I have a friend of mine who would go on a very exclusive vacation every year. And since we don't take vacations on credit cards, we actually pay cash for them. I, made the assumption that most people did too. And this person went on a really nice vacation, and it was like a 10 or 11 days, and it was an expensive one. And we were talking afterwards, and the person was kind of sad because they did that, but they still had student loans. And I was just like, I didn't lose my face during the conversation. I thought, wow, why would somebody spend $5,000 or $6,000 on a vacation for 7 days when they're still paying off student loans from 5 or 8 years ago, 10 years ago, however long it was? I don't even know. But so if we need to be content with where we are in our lives. And if you have credit card debt, that's something because you paid something that you living beyond your means, you honestly can't afford some things. And that's honesty. Sometimes the best thing to do is be honest with yourself. Fyodor Dostoevsky says, above all, do not lie to yourself. We can't lie to ourselves. We say we can afford something when we're in debt in one way and charging something else and making it even worse. We need to learn how to live within our means and be content with where we are. And if we are discontent, and if you are way deep in debt, you should be discontent with where you are. You should be discontent with the things that happen in your life and find ways to eliminate that debt, at least downsize that debt to a manageable level. And, again, I don't get my knickers in and out of people who have car loans or house loans. And I don't think if you pay your house off, all of a sudden you become this magical, great steward. It's not necessarily true. And you will have to decide. You need to decide where you're at with the whole debt thing. If you think, I'm always gonna have car loans, then then who cares? Just have car loans. Just own it and move on. But I would highly recommend having student loans paid off. Any kind of unsecured debt should be totally paid off, and you should not live under the yoke of that anymore, right? So have that debt snowball, debt avalanche. I heard one person talked about, I can't remember what they call it, the debt nuclear bomb or something, and that person ranked their debts by the way they hated them the most. They hated this debt, and it didn't make any mathematical sense, didn't make any timing sense. It was a total emotional thing, but guess what? It mattered to them, and they did it. So you find what works for you, and then you do it. So another thing is, how about your giving statement from year to year? Track this and find out, are you giving the way you want to give? Are you giving fearlessly and generously and radically? Or are you kind of backing off on your giving because things got tough? I like to track that as well. I think it's very good to track that number and find out where you are in the scope of things. And if you can give more, give more. And set a goal for yourself at the beginning of each year or whenever you start the giving process and say, next year I want to give 5% more, 10% more. Don't get locked into a standard Army issue number. Be open to God and be open to the needs of people and find out where you can give and give to the best of your ability and open your heart. Go to like 2 Corinthians 9:7 and give as you purpose in your heart, and let God encourage you to do this, invite you to do this, and don't give out of compulsion or guilt or shame, but give out of joy. God loves a cheerful giver. So another thing we can do is track our Social Security statement. Now, some people think, well, it's never going to be there. Well, it's there for now. So I would recommend every year pulling a statement and finding out where you are on that spectrum. As soon as you turn 25, the Social Security Administration will start making these statements for you. And so what you should do is every year log into the system. You can make an account for yourself and log in and make sure everything's being credited to your account accordingly. And that's a number you should use when planning your retirement account. So until someone says it's done, it's over, then you need to count that into your retirement savings. And so for some people, unfortunately, that's all they have. But if you're listening to this and you're young, hopefully it'll be around when you're still around, and also it'll supplement your income. And then you can possibly put less in to your 401k or IRAs because, some people might overfund them. Now that's highly unlikely in a lot of situations because we're fighting greed and all kinds of other things. But it's also a number we have at our disposal and we should use. So I recommend you doing that. And that brings us to this next number is how much money do you need to retire on? And for some of us, we're closer to it than others, but that's a number that can be calculated. It's complicated. I mean, some people make it really simple and they say, well, you need 80% of your current salary. And there's a certain truth to that because you take your current salary and you stop paying into your 401k, you stop paying into Social Security. So there are a lot of times that might be 20% difference right there. If you're full on Medicare, you may stop paying healthcare insurance. So you need to figure out a mathematical calculation to find out what you need to reproduce for your income. And then you also need to consider inflation, which right now, I'm recording this in 2023, and inflation's been crazy for the last year and a half, and there's really no end in sight of its craziness. But you also need to determine when you plan on retiring, how long you plan on living. So you need to do future value and present value calculations. It's not a real simple thing. I mean, you can do it in like 5 or 10 minutes in the Savvy Stewardship Academy. We have a simple spreadsheet. You just plug in some numbers and it gives you that number. And then what you can do with that number, say your number is $2 million. And then you can back into that number and say, how much do I have to contribute to my 401k/IRA on a legitimate return I can get, say 5, 6, 7, 8% on this number? How much do I need to contribute to this? So we don't do a standard 15%. Everyone puts in 15% because if I put in 15% to my 401k, I'm limiting what I can actually give, right? And so I recommend you find the number that's right for you, and then you can call Audible and you can readjust it every year. But we're not all the same. Some of us have more in savings and have larger Social Security coming, so we can put in less. Some of us started later in life and we probably need to put in more, but there's trade-offs to be made. So I recommend you find the number that's right for you, and you do that, right? Another thing to do is track your annual credit report, and do so to check your score and check to make sure there's nothing funky going on in your credit. I'm one of those guys that talk about money who believe a FICO score, a good FICO score, is a good thing. I don't believe a zero FICO score is helpful. I believe that millionaires and billionaires can probably live without them, but most of us who are everyday people need a credit report that's showing, positive things. It's not necessarily an I love debt score. I have one credit card. I had the same credit card since 1987, and that's the only one I have. And I have a mortgage, and my credit score is very good. It's considered exceptional according to FICO. And I don't love debt. I don't have debt. I pay off my credit card each month before the bill comes in. I've been doing this for a very long time. So there is such thing as responsible credit card use. Now everyone can do that. But also not everyone can, stop eating at a certain time, but you don't stop eating because you have a tendency to overeat. So we don't stop eating because we have a propensity to overeat. We just learn to not overeat. And the same thing is with credit cards. If you can use your credit card, then use it. It's convenient, it's helpful, and make sure your credit score is good, right? So we don't borrow money and not repay. We're not those kind of people. And I'm also a guy who believes that budgeting is important. And I know the monthly budget can be a hassle, and sometimes they cause fights, but it's a blueprint of your finances. So I recommend that you do every month, I believe you should do a budget, but every year, we're talking about annual things here. Every year, I recommend that you do a large budget and you think through 5-10 years. You might only do the 5-10 years one time as a couple, but this is when you start capturing things like roofs that need to be replaced, appliances and furniture, automobiles, cars, whatever, SUVs, things of that nature that aren't on your normal everyday expense. And you can start determining how much you need to save for those events. So if you don't plan on moving ever, and so you have a roof that's good for 15 years, and you're like, oh, we need a roof in 15 years. This may be an extreme example, but if you're saving $50 a month, let's say $50 a month for a roof, and you're throwing this into your savings account and earmarking it roof, and then all of a sudden in 15 years when it comes like we need a new roof, then you have the money to do it. And when you have a car, you say you buy a new car and you pay it off in a couple of years, you drive it for 3 or 4 more years during that time, instead of just spending that money, you start throwing that money into a bucket too. And then when you need a new car, you have the money there. These are called sinking funds. And so I think that the monthly budget actually helps you stay on track for keeping expenses tight and being a good steward in that way. The annual budget helps you see down the road for a full year, and the 5 and 10 makes it see even longer for things, and you can start making accommodations for these things to happen. So those are things I recommend people do on an annual basis. They call it, a annual financial checkup, so to speak. I think it's really important, and it can be encouraging. It also can keep us on track for our financial dreams, goals, and vision. All right. So I hope this has been a blessing to you. If it has, please like, subscribe, and share. Until then, I dare you to profit so you can promote and practice radical, fearless generosity. Blessings.